question of what than why. So, like the question, why are we here, supposes that we know what we are. And so we go like, of course we're all human beings, we know what that is, so but why are human beings here? And I'm like, I really don't think we know what a human being is. And I think what a human being actually is a funnel for the Godhead. Like, I think, so I'm skeptical of belief in general, so I often think of them as like pet theories or something. So I like to have theories because in some ways, theories can like engender a deeper understanding, but I'm cautious with myself and then when I speak about them, not to speak about them as though they're right in any way. Because the reality of the situation is what, why, how, and otherwise is way too strange for us to understand. Like there's no chance at all. Somebody, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said there's like as much chance as a goldfish understanding the intricacies of the metro system in New York City as we have of understanding. And probably the goldfish has a much better chance actually of understanding. So it's too weird. So I'm skeptical of belief, but if I pick up a pet theory and I go, what is this? What's going on here? What I think is happening is that the reality is much closer to a language than it is a reality. Like I think human beings, the difference between us and other animals is that we noticed the lingual quality of the universe. We noticed that it was a Godhead reading reality. And so matter is composed of understandings and links that aren't actually linked. There's no such thing as cause and effect. That I feel fairly sure about. Like I just really think cause and effect is total like religion. Like it's like total dogma. That again, it's too strange. Like the links are us being like this and this, and it's like, but we're mimicking something when we do that. We didn't learn how to do that on our own. We noticed that. I think of them often in terms of densities of understanding. So like we have a certain density of understanding that's more dense than a squirrel. We have like a higher consolidation of understanding. Some people think like, no, squirrels understand as much as we do. And I don't think that's true. I think human beings have the deepest understanding of what's happening than any animal on the planet by a long shot. Dolphins might be as smart, whales might be as smart, but our dexterity with language, I think is a factor. I think it has more just to do with the fact that we have opposable thumbs. I think we saw something. We peered into the true nature of reality, and we recoiled from it, which is where the ego came in, because I think all of human history is essentially this flinch from seeing this nature, this thing that we saw. And so I think that we are in the presence of a density of understanding. Like some people think of it as the Gaian mind or things like that. Like those concepts really resonate with me. Like I think that there's a pervading intelligence either local to this planet or maybe just in the universe. Who knows? Like again, two goldfish trying to explain the subway, but there's a density of understanding that I believe has agency and is trying to show us what it is, and we are trying desperately to understand, but are terrified of it because it's so strange. But I think when we look at human history in the sharp left that we took, the fact that this isn't all people talk about, it blows me away. That like we talk about like natural evolution and we think it's just totally normal. That like yeah, like things happen and then you know the fish like came on the land and then we like made computers. And that as though that is just a totally normal thing. Clearly there was an interruption there. Clearly something happened to push us on this other trajectory. And so that's why I think about densities of understanding, because I think that if there's like a dense object of understanding and our understanding is kind of floating along, we're like caught in the gravitational pull of this denser understanding. We're gonna collide, we're on a collision course with this thing. And that's a pet theory because again, whatever it actually is too strange to understand. But I do think there are certain things that can be gleaned. Most importantly is that we are in contact with something. We are with something. Something is here, and it knows more than we do. So beyond that, it's kind of hard for me to say, but I feel that's pretty. That one doesn't seem that controversial. Like in my mind, I'm not like, is it or isn't it? And I'm like, no, that we are in the presence of something. Now, what it is, and what we are. Who in the world knows?
Do you think it's possible for humans, or maybe certain humans, to just get closer in touch with whatever that is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the funny thing about it is that I referenced psychedelics earlier, but if you ingest ayahuasca enough times, you will have no doubt in your mind that there is a pervading intelligence in the universe. Maybe even just once, but maybe not the one time, because psychedelics are strange. That's the understatement of the century, but they're strange even in the way that they interact with different people. But the truth of the matter is that we have been in symbiosis with plants for a very long time, and it's not just a physical symbiosis. Like, we can totally understand the physical symbiosis. I eat a carrot, I live, the carrot gets its like genetics spread around. There's a cognitive symbiosis there with plants as well. Psychedelics they fit too well in our brains to not be something that's been happening for a very long time, and actually I believe that we've evolved with them. This relationship with this plant, this collaboration, can allow you to experience the intelligence that is all pervading and immanent in the world. It's hard to experience it because it's impersonal. It doesn't present as a thing. It doesn't like show you. We personify everything. We anthropomorphize everything. The truth of the matter is that plants are as much alive as we are, and they are not personal. They're a different type of being. They're maybe more chemical than behavioral. We're behavioral, they're chemical. There's other types of beings that are even stranger than that to us, or more foreign to us than that are totally impersonal. The idea of the concepts of personalities do not apply to them. And when we meet them, and when I meet them, it's terrifying. I am shaken to my core that this thing that is plain in front of my face exists the way it does, because it's crazy. And then I come back and I go, well, I don't want to tell anyone that because they're going to lock me up in a loony bin. And I've developed like defense mechanisms. I like talk about it in a certain way, or I like make sure that I'm like keeping my language facility present as I stumble over my words as I say that. But I try to keep my language facility really high, so it like disarms people from being like, this is an insane idea. But the truth is, human beings have been talking about this forever. There is no indigenous person on this planet, or at least with a religious facility, no shamans, no medicine women, that would bat an eye at this concept. They'd be like, of course, you all are much behind. Like, the modern world is so far behind where the arcane world is in terms of its understanding of the Gaian mind and plant intelligence and other intelligences in general, and the nature of reality. So they get it, and not to say that they get it, we don't, because that's not entirely true. We understand things about reality that they don't understand. But in terms of these concepts that we consider so foreign to our worldview, they really don't have those same hang-ups that we have. And we frankly have those hang-ups because we're more afraid than they are of the disillusionment of boundary that comes with a connection with an impersonal being. And I'm right there with everyone. It scares me, but I also feel compelled to. I'm too curious to not. I can't not look under the hood. I'm like, I got to, and I'm terrified, but I got to go back. I'm like, I just have to see. But it's, again, it's so strange. Psychedelics are the most subjective experience that could possibly be had. Like your importance in day-to-day life might wax and wane. Like, you might be walking around, you're driving, and you sort of forget about yourself for a second. There is no forgetting or not noticing on psychedelics. And that can be really jarring for people, and it is really jarring for me that it's so subjective, it's all about you, and you kind of realize how important your actual experience is, like the stuff of you is the stuff of it. It's all there is. Like when we feel inadequate, it's kind of funny because it's like, what else? There's nothing else. This is just what there is. And so the experience of that is a lot. And as warm as it might sound, it is also as dark and cold, and as beautiful and loving as it might sound, it is also as cold and impersonal and just like it is probably the strongest, weirdest experience that a human being could have this side of death. So one, I would just say is like, take it seriously. It's not a game. Like you're gonna see, you have the potential to see something on psychedelics that you can never unsee, you can never undo it. What I would recommend in terms of somebody stepping into that space is do it a little bit first, like take a little bit and kind of get used to the general sensations that come with it. There's nothing chemically dangerous about them at all, in the slightest bit. Like there's no chance of overdose if you take the known psychedelics. Like if you go find like there are poisons out there that have psychedelic-like qualities that are dangerous. But if you could eat more mushrooms than you could possibly stand, and you would be totally fine. Physically, psychologically, you might not come back. This is a long, rambling answer that really should just boil down to the old psychedelic maxim of set and setting. So set being your mindset, like you should be ready. You should be just feeling okay. Like I don't do them unless I feel like it's the right time to do them. So it's not just every time it comes up, or if I'm like, I really gotta, it's been 3 months or whatever. I think it just has to feel right. You have to feel that out on your own. The other thing is the setting is super important. For me, trees are important. Water is a bonus. So a cabin on the lake, go to the North Shore, eat a bunch of mushrooms, sit on a rock, you're probably gonna be okay. And the other thing to remember is that if you do it right, there will come a moment where you think you did too much. And you go, uh-oh. Because what happens is a dimension opens up that's not usually there, and you feel yourself sliding along it. And you go, and so in that moment, if you can say to yourself out loud or sing to yourself out loud, it's okay. I'm okay. This is okay. I think you will be in a better place to let go. And in my experience, bad trips come when you hold on to something. And the badness of the trip is the mushroom saying to you, I'm going to take this from you the easy way or the hard way. Now you can give it to me, or I'll take it from you. And if you can get it, you have a much easier time. But if you hold on, and sometimes you don't even know. Sometimes I'll be in that state and I'll feel the mushroom pulling. Usually mushrooms are for me the one. I'll feel it pulling something like away from me, and I'll go, what am I holding on to? Like I can feel it pulling, but I don't know on what. And there is suffering involved here. Like there is suffering involved, but it's okay. It is okay, and you are okay. And actually, the best thing about psychedelics is that you come out the other end, or you can come out the other end, with a deep, deep sense that everything is okay. That you're okay to die, it's not what you think it is. That this is okay, that your life is fine, it's okay. Suffering is okay, pain is okay. It's pretty, it's a gift. It's a gift. It is, but the trick with that is it's usually the ego saying, drop the ego. Like the trickiest part about the ego is that it'll say whatever it needs to say in order to live. Like it's not stupid. So most of the time, myself included, when I hear people being like, that's just the ego getting in the way, I gotta drop the ego. It's like, I'm like, yo, but that's the ego saying that. So the ego can it's like the ego is always a step ahead. It just is. So to me, the aspect of dropping the ego is necessary, because unless you start thinking on those terms, it's really impossible to actually like go through the process of, which is really a painful, tearing, psychological ripping. There's no like nice way for this to happen. It has to happen painfully. It's ingrown into us, and you cannot just rip like a piece of like rotten skin that's been grafted onto your arm. You're not just gonna like slowly scrape that off. You have to rip it off. It hurts. And the whole time the ego will be screaming, if you do this, you're gonna die. You're ending. I am you. But if you engage in a practice like meditation, which to me, like I personally don't, I think as Americans, we have to be very careful with adopting cultural traditions that are not our own. Meditation, I don't see as a cultural tradition, but it is associated with cultural traditions. And sometimes we think those schools of meditation are like totally applicable to us, when it's like taking a medicine for an illness that you don't have. Like it's not necessarily medicine, but which is where I think the problem comes in. Like as a culture, our cultural ego has adopted the term ego and the term of dropping the ego as really a self-defense mechanism. The ego is more alive than ever, and more alive in those communities that are obsessed with dropping it more than it ever has been maybe in human history.
Wow.
And so I think there's a trick to it. But like if you sit down, if you do nothing, if you practice nothing, then it can actually start to separate, and you can sort of start to see like what's behind it. Like I think Pema Chodron or some other amazing person said that the ego is like a person standing in front of a window, and you're standing behind the person trying to like get a peek at what's outside of the window. And that's a magnificent metaphor. It makes a ton of sense. That person's not going to get out of the way of the window. The ego does not want you to see what's on the other side of the window, and you have installed it there is the weirdest thing. Like you want to see what's on the outside, but you don't want to see what's on the outside. So to me, the beauty of meditation is that as terrified as I am of seeing what's on the other side of the window, meditation allows for a slow but deliberate widening of the space that I allow myself to see out the window. Like we all know what's outside of the window, which is why we don't want to look outside the window. I now read to help supplant the cultural narrative that keeps me infantilized and on exploring and sort of like, this is what reality is, and the best you can hope for is success in a field. Like you can like pick a thing and then be good at it, and that's like the best, that's all you get.
Yeah.
And so many people have talked about their experience with the nature of reality, that there's this book called The Tibetan Book of the Living and Dead, and I'm gonna butcher the name. It's by a Rinpoche, and I can't remember what his name is, but The Tibetan Book of the Living and the Dead is just magnificent. It's about Tibetan Buddhist teachings on life and on death. And I don't necessarily agree with everything they say. Like I can see a lot of cultural prescriptions in there that seem to work. I mean, this person seems extremely lucid and calm in a way that outstrips anything I think I have access to at the moment. But you know, I wouldn't take it wholesale. But it's actually a pretty magnificent primer in how to deal with the psychedelic experience, how to deal with existence itself, how to like touch experience with less fear. And so that has been really impactful. The Psychology and Alchemy by Carl Jung. So one of the things that for me is very striking about the psychedelic experience is I often see forms that are fully fledged concepts. Like instead of like a bird flapping by, it's like the concept of a bird flaps by, but it's not in the shape of a bird, but you recognize it as the concept of a bird. That is so disorienting to me. And I remember coming down from one particular trip where I was like, I need help here piecing this back together. Like, what did just happen? Like, what, how is this possible? And Carl Jung's Psychology and Alchemy was particularly grounding. He mapped the psyche in a way that he was like kind of like Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea and all the wait, they were together, right? Sacagawea and Lewis and Clark.
Yeah.
We'll pretend even so.
Supposedly.
But whatever the insert metaphor here, he was like a little bit of a pioneer in terms of mapping the psyche, and was doing it in a way that was very different than anyone else at the time or since has done it. And he's particularly good at talking about the different symbol sets that live throughout history. So he really influenced Joseph Campbell and like the hero of many faces and things like that. So that he was really good at that, comparing multiple things together and bringing in different texts, like the Gnostic Gospels that I had read but didn't really understand what they were getting at. And then when I read his summation of what they were doing, I was able to click in a lot more. There's also a lot of folk traditions that are oral but that have been written down, that reading a lot of them is helpful. Like no one in particular really. Like I have my favorites, like the Yoruba tradition of like the drunk god. To me, that's like such a beautiful poetic way of explaining what's going on. But it's not like any one in particular. I would be like, oh yeah, that's what happened. I'm blanking on which one it is, but there's one where God like pees in a stream, and then I'm like, that also. So I'm like, cool, that makes sense to me. But I think taken as an aggregate, I'm really, really influenced by indigenous thought a lot, like maybe more than anything. Like if I'm influenced by, like say Carl Jung or something like that, it's because he's like translating a lot of their thoughts for me in a way that I can understand more immediately than just straight from their mouth. Because the thing is about a lot of like indigenous and folk stories is that outside of the cultural context, it's really not. You're very likely to cast projections on them or interpret them the way that's convenient to you. Like your ego will step in and be like, this is what this means. But I think, some of these Western thinkers that have come around that have had the proper reverence for this arcane thinking and put it in a position of prominence in the field of ideas did a really good job of translating them for everyone else and saying, this is why this is of supreme importance to us today. And so, there's just a few. I mean, there's like so many books that have really done it. Alan Watts has been particularly helpful. D.T. Suzuki, J. Krishnamurti. There are a lot of people who talk about the general thrust of kind of what I like to get at.